who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest, work in a row and pass the bags along, who stand in the line, haul in the places, who are not parlor generals or field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud, botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust, but the thing worth doing well has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphimores for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know, they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. A person for work that is real. For me, I think one of the most fascinating things about being a seller on Amazon, it's like I found work that is real, that I own, that I do. Steve and I visited Sam in his warehouse 2 years ago, and what fascinated me about that, and this was his old warehouse, was when we went in and we saw, it reminded me of this poem by Marge Piercy. Because if you've ever seen him and his team in action, right, they don't dally in the shallows. They jump into work head first, and they harness themselves to the task. And when Steve and I left and we were going back home, we said, man, what do we have to do to be part of what he's doing? Because what he's doing is amazing. The energy, right? And so what's cool is 2 years ago, Sam and his team were harnessed up, and they were pulling his business to success, right? And then a year ago, Sam, he reached out to Steve and I and he said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And we said, man, are you sure? That's going to be a heavy burden. And so now a year ago, not only is Sam and his team harnessed and pulling his business to success, but now he's harnessed many of us in this room. And he's helping pull our business, right, to success. And that's what I call good leadership. So let's give Sam a round of applause. Leadership is not easy, and the burden is heavy, and I think you've done an amazing job bearing it, so we appreciate that. And so, in the spirit of that poem, right, I just want to rip through, because I know we got lunch coming up, rip through 5 things quickly that I've seen at Ace, and 5 things that my mom and dad taught me as I was growing up, and I'm sure they probably taught you as you were growing up. Real quickly before I get to those, though, I want to show you this rope. If someone in the back of the room can pick up that rope. So this rope right here, and I want you to think about this as I go through these 5 things. This little black piece of tape on the end of this rope, this represents where we are just getting started as online sellers, right? Right now, only 10% of all goods are sold online. We are at the forefront. It is just beginning, folks. As he holds up the end of that rope, this is what we have in the next 40 years. We are just this right now. This much. And we got that much that we got to look forward to. So if you're not building the business for yourself, right, we're building it for generations that come after us. So with that in mind, I just want to go through 5 things that I've seen in Ace, 5 things that I think my mom and my dad taught me. The first one is this: work is good. My father was serious when we were growing up. I have 3 older brothers. We had to get a job. And for us, the first job was when we were in the 6th grade, we had a paper route. Anybody here have a paper route? Raise your hand. So you're going to feel me that when I talk about this. Paper route wasn't easy, especially on Wednesdays and Sundays, right? Because those are the days that the inserts had to be put in the paper and it would be heavy. And so you would strap a bag on one side, a bag on another. You would get on your BMX bike and you would have to ride 2 miles even before you threw the first paper, right? That was the paper route. But the worst part was this. As a 6th grader, I would have to go knock on the doors of the people I delivered newspaper to, and you have to collect money, right? And it was always and forever somebody would have an excuse of why they couldn't pay that week for the money. Now Steve, he works for a newspaper company. He remembers this. But the worst part is the agent that would come to your house on Saturday morning, right? It was usually this old guy. And he would demand money from the people you were delivering paper to. And if you didn't give him the money, he took it out of your paycheck. And so there were some weeks, right, where you would work and you wouldn't make any money because people wouldn't pay you. You'd basically be delivering it for free. But my father was intense. You had to get a job like that. Our second job, we worked at a grocery store, 4 years. Again, I had 3 older brothers. All 4 of us worked at a local grocery store our freshman year through our senior year in high school. And it was a requirement. It was a rite of passage. We had to do it. Now, I'm a college graduate, but I'll be honest. I learned more during those 4 years of working at that grocery store about life and about work than I ever learned in the classroom. So the first one is that work is good. Second one that is my father taught me that consistency is the key to life. I've seen that in my Amazon business. And I'm sure you've seen that in your life. When you marry consistency and effort, success always comes. The third one is one that my mom taught me, and that was this. Look out for the interests of others as much as you look out for your own. Fascinating. Last night, I love coming to these conferences because I love talking to other sellers. Every time I talk to another seller, I see that there's another way to make money on Amazon. And so when you look out for the interest of others, right, your life changes. Now, my mom, what she would used to do is she would go visit nursing homes. So when I was age about 4 to 7, she would take me along. Now, back then, as you can imagine, as a young kid, I used to hate going. But my mom would go to these nursing homes that were filled with elderly people. They were government-funded nursing homes nobody wanted to go to. And I can remember going into these nursing homes, and even now I remember the smells, right, when I would enter that place. And my mom would go to these homes. She would sacrifice her time. She played the accordion and she sang. And she would go and she would love on these elderly people. And when I would go, because they never saw children, they would always want to pat me on the head. You know, they would rub me on the shoulder. I didn't like the experience. But now as I get older, I figured it out. She was looking out for the interest of others as much as she was looking out for her own interests. And I've seen that in my Amazon business. I've seen that in Sam and his team in this previous year where they've sacrificed time looking out for the interest of others as much as they look out for their own interests. That's the third one. The fourth one is this. My father was a farmer growing up. If you know anything about farmers, they have a lot of grit and perseverance. And that's one thing my father always hammered to us. It doesn't matter how much talent we have. He would say, sons, look, do you got the grit and do you got the perseverance? And so I often share a story of a person who's really close to me, I think, that demonstrates this. It's about a little girl. Her name was Rose. When Rose was 4 years old, her father was imprisoned for murdering another man. When Rose turned 7, her mother, who was struggling with a mental illness, jumped off of a bridge and committed suicide. Rose lived in the projects of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. She lived with her grandmother and her mother and 2 sisters. 3 months after her mother committed suicide, Rose's grandmother died. And so she had lost her father to prison at the age of 4. Now she had lost her mother and her grandmother at the age of 7. Rose and her sisters didn't know where they were going to go. She didn't know who was going to take care of her. And an aunt in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, volunteered to care for Rose. And so Rose moved to Harrisburg. She was in Harrisburg for 3 months. And she was crossing the street, didn't look one way, got hit by a car. The impact was so great. She was in when she was in the ambulance, she flatlined. And they had to bring her back to life. She was in the hospital for 6 months during that time. And so when she was in the hospital, her older sister, who was 7 years older, who had now kind of become her primary caregiver, got into a fight with her aunt who had taken them in. And her sister and her aunt picked up knives. They cut each other. Her sister ran out of the house, and Rose never saw her sister again. And if you talk to Rose today, she'll tell you that when she was in that hospital and she learned that her sister had left, it was one of the loneliest and most depressing times in her life. She continued to live in Harrisburg. When she was in the 8th grade, her aunt enrolled her into a boarding school. It's called Milton Hershey School, where lonely little kids like her could come part of a family. And Rose will tell you that when she entered into this place and she started becoming part of this community of teachers, of house parents, and of administrators that started to wrap their arms around her and help with the wounds that she was dealing with, it transformed her life. Rose went on, graduated from college. She has a master's degree right now. And if you haven't figured it out yet, Rose is also my wife. Her name is Deanna Rose SLAMANS. We've been married for 20 years, but she always reminds me, again, when I look at her, I have no excuses. I think it was the grit and the perseverance that she carries. And look, as Amazon sellers, the world is at our feet. Think about that rope. We got the whole way for that rope. And if we combine what a lot of folks are saying today, you combine that with grit and perseverance, it's amazing what we can do. So that's the 4th thing. And the 5th thing is this, and this is the last, is my parents taught me and they hammered it into us to live by the golden rule. To do unto others as you would have them